who can't come down to your level. And I don't mean that to be demeaning, but like the first time I fired up WebGoat, I'm like, well, it says it has these vulnerabilities in it. And even though you're reading the instructions, you don't necessarily know what the heck's going on if this is something that you're new to. So one of the things that we want to do is have this be a place where you can come, fire this up, and be like, hey, how would you like me to help you with web applications today? And you can sort of follow your way through what you want to do and get feedback from some of the leaders in the industry. So in short, we want to make this a cohesive tool that really helps people in these research areas, not just putting a bunch of stuff as a collection on a CD. So that means documenting what the vulnerabilities are, showing people how they can gather evidence, doing all these various other plugins and things which a lot of tools and compilations of tools have started to address, and then they just kind of stopped because it met the needs of the people who were doing that project, and they really didn't have any need to go beyond that. So looking towards the future, I'm here because we want to get people involved. We're trying, again, as I said, to get it so we can get more people to collaborate, figure out how to distribute tasks. We've got some stuff up on Google Code. It's not that great right now. We pretty much have a big blob on a download server and some commentary up there. But we also want to get more apps and more app developers involved, more realistic applications. I mean, there's a lot more stuff out there. I mean, Adobe Flash and Flex are out there constantly. Flash, you can do all sorts of crazy stuff with, but it's not just client side. You have AMS servers in the background that are talking specific encoded binary streams to Flash. A lot of government sites, for those of you who are local to DC, a lot of government sites are going up on Drupal. And not to knock Drupal, because their core security team is really good and they're really, really focused on it. But even they admit, they're like, we've got the Drupal core locked down. We have no control over what people build in on top of that. Ruby on Rails, a lot of the little .com sites and trendy sites are built on that. And most of the time, the stuff that's coming out of OWASP and other organizations is really focused on things like Java that are used in corporate environments because that's where the day jobs are paying for the work to be done and it gets transferred over. So anyhow, if you're interested in this, we have basically a short URL if you want to get to it for OSbwaorg because the OS.org site is incredibly long and ugly. We set up a Google group. Hopefully it will be populated by people. Chuck released version .9, which is sort of our beta at AppSec DC. It's mostly functional. It doesn't do anywhere near as much as we like, although it does everything I've outlined in the presentation so far. It has a couple bugs, but they're minor. And we're going to look at releasing version 1.0 later in 2010. We're probably going to do some point releases between now and then to fix up the bugs, but the other releases will pretty much be a function of what people do and help out. So I blew through that really quickly. But if anyone here wants to help, donate broke applications or feedback, please let us know. And now I will take questions. Or I can actually ask some of my own questions of myself that I skipped over early in the presentation if people are going to stare at me blankly. Anyone? Shmoo balls? Come on, Rob. So, wow, I can't see them and they're missing me. This is awesome. Oh, question.
Yeah. So, I'm trying to learn web app stuff. I want to use those vulnerabilities in the web app to leverage vulnerabilities at the OS level. So, I care about Windows. Is there any thought to maybe putting some insecure apps in the box?
Yeah, see, the problem with that's the first thing. All right, so to address some of, to play my own devil's advocate here, there's a couple of questions I've gotten asked outside of this presentation. And, the questions are, why did you make it a live CD? Why are you making it a VM? Why is it running on Windows, et cetera, et cetera? The biggest problem with Windows is licensing. So it's one of those things where we're really, OWASP is really focused on things which, OWASP is a nonprofit. They're a formal nonprofit. There's a foundation that has a bank account and funds things. We had a conference at the DC Convention Center. We've had conferences around the world. It's not a trivial organization, but it's really dedicated to these open principles. So one of the problems with having a project that does that is the Windows licensing functionality. People, I think, have looked at ways to get around it before, but realistically, I think unless something happens where Microsoft, allows for specific licenses for testing, that is always going to be a big issue with a project like this. I'd love to include it if somebody can figure out how we don't get sued doing it. Honestly, most of my web stuff in the early days was spent on IIS, not on Apache. But if somebody can figure out the legalese, we would love to include that. But that's pretty much the standard answer is it's not going to be done on Windows because we are really focused on keeping it all open source so that you can pull it apart and do whatever you want to with it rather than running into licensing and restrictions first off. So. Well, I mean, all right, the question was, what about Flex and things that are client-side? That's really where the problem seems to be today. All right, so really it's a comprehensive problem. It's not something that you can just assign to that. I mean, if by client-side you mean stuff is being exploited client-side, I mean, yeah, people are doing that constantly, but one of the biggest ways that people can exploit stuff is they stick it on a server, and then you go to that site to get it. So I don't think that this project is going to be focused on that, but we're definitely going to have it in there, and especially if we move into stuff like Flash, Flex, and stuff that's back-ended by AMF and various Adobe formats, client stuff is something you've got to consider. But this is really mainly focused on securing application code. But realistically, one of the biggest problems for clients getting exploited, I mean, not getting into the semantics of all the problems of, IE shouldn't have these vulnerabilities or this operating system shouldn't have these vulnerabilities, but realistically, you have a lot of servers that are neutral servers. They're not intentionally hostile. They're somebody hosting, Joe's Farm Service or something, or a sandwich shack. They're little mom and pops, or they're big businesses that you trust, neither of which intend to be hostile. But because they don't have good server security, somebody was able to put something malicious on them, and you got dinged by it just by going to an innocent website. So I guess we're not really looking at focusing on the client-side issues with this, but a lot of the client attacks are caused because somebody's web server application is insecure, and that allows them to be serving garbage in the first place. Does that help?
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with you, but yeah.
Well, I mean, as I said, there's a big philosophical debate that could open up there, but for the sake of this project, we're mainly looking at web server technologies and applications that are going to reside on web servers. So that's our scope. Well, again, that's going to be one of the challenges, and that's one of the reasons that we're looking to people to help out. Because if something does come with restrictive licensing requirements, we're probably going to shy away from it due to the nature of what we're doing. One of the things that we want to do, though, is a lot of cases, if you pull up an old version of something like WordPress or something else like that, it's blank, it's empty. And so ideally, if we get the right people helping out, what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to create more complex applications in the free things, which will model what's going on in some more complex real-world applications. Because right now, yes, if you stand up like WordPress or something, it's going to have some vulnerabilities if you're using version 2.0. But they're going to be kind of boring to do anything about. But if somebody has a website which WordPress has been integrated into, and it's being used as a content management system, and it's got some other plugins in it, that's going to be a lot more fun to attack. So again, with the licensing issue there, if something actually does have real licensing, we're probably going to shy away from it. But one of our hopes is, as this evolves, if we get people who are willing to, and I've got some local DC developers who are not security people who are interested in helping, which to me is terribly exciting, because I'm always excited when non-security people actually pay attention to security stuff. But the idea is that, again, if somebody's like, I want to model the behavior that's in this, or I want to sort of like look at the session management that's in this, maybe if there's a real need for it, or if it's really something that's being done in this paid product that you can do in open source and we can bribe some developer to implement it, great, we'll try and implement it that way. But again, our focus is in open source because we want this to be viral, we want this to be something that we can distribute easily and get out there. And again, that's kind of one of the double-edged swords of doing stuff under the OWASP aegis. But at the same time, if it was something with license, legally, I would have to charge a license fee every time I handed it out, and then you might as well be paying $1,000 a day for a training course. So. Is that like the second or third one you've missed with? Third. Awesome. Anyone? Anyone? All right, well, I have managed to do this talk in a record amount of time. I cut it down and perhaps too much. But yeah, some of the other questions we've gotten asked by some of the people, like Kevin Johnson asked me about, he does the Samurai live CD, and he's like, why aren't you doing a live CD? Realistically, one of the things we're trying to do is we're tackling an incredibly complex topic, and we don't want to add any extra complications for ourselves. I see a use for live CDs for attack tools, because there are, theoretically, above board, ethically, going to be the occasional situation where you want to magically turn a computer into